So yes, it's that time of year again. The good old capitalist exploitation of funds for no particular reason. It's Valentines, a celebration of love by spending loads of excess money on someone you're already probably in a relationship with, who you probably treat well throughout the year, or you should. I mean, it'd be not a great relationship if you only treat someone good on one day of the year, would it? But whatever. Yes, indeed, it's Valentine's. Technically, it's actually still in January and the snow's just melted, so it's a muddy swamp. I was going to go somewhere nice for this, but the weather hasn't really permitted it, so you're stuck with this place again. Anyway, for this year I've decided to do my Valentine's kind of video all around the Greek myths. I'll keep this brief because it's probably going to be long. I was going to do love gods, but there's a lot of gods in this, but they do have some interesting story. I'll try and keep it light and humoured because I think we all know some of these myths. Yeah, that ain't love unless you live in Norfolk in this country or the deep south in America. It's that kind of loving, isn't it? A lot of it. So anyway, we'll just get cracked on. I mean, that's ultimately what it's about. So let's start with the god who can't keep it in his pants, basically, and his love story, obviously, with his good old sister Hera. I was going to do Demeter, but no, you can't make humour from that anyway. So yeah, how did they meet? Well, they met because they're brother and sister, as you probably guessed. And when he became kind of king of the gods, after all the the murdering and his let's call it non-consensual relationship with his other sister Demeter, he turned his eyes to his the goddess of marriage, which was Hera, or Hera. And however, she rejected him continuous times. I mean, you would really, wouldn't you? So he came up with a plan where he turned himself into a bird. I believe it might have been a cuckoo, actually. And Hera was a big fan of these birds, and she couldn't resist the little bird, so she picked it up and took pity on it and placed it in her bosom. Anyway, Zeus transformed back into Zeus, and for some reason something happened where she couldn't resist him, and decided to give him a go and accepted his marriage proposal. And they fell madly in love. Their wedding lasted 300 years as well, apparently. That must have been quite expensive, one would think. And obviously after that, we all know what happened, pretty much. Zeus was perhaps not the most loyal, let's put it that way. So how have I decided to scent them? Now Zeus is mentioned twice a bit later on, but in this one, for Zeus I've gone for Goldman because, he's the chief god. It's a very classy, elegant fragrance that a kind of king would wear. It's got the similar DNA to Chanel No. 5, so it's lily of the valley, it's musks, aldehydes, it's a nice touch of civet. It's got this just pure class and elegance about it, and yeah, he'd definitely go for that, wouldn't he? And then for Hera, I've gone for Terroni. Now, no, perhaps not at this time, but Terroni it's Orto Parisi. I don't think there are listed notes, but it's kind of like this red version of Black Afghano. It's kind of got these smouldering, simmering notes. And this kind of burnt feel in the bottom, this redness. I don't know what that's from, berries, maybe there's rose or something in it. doesn't really matter because you don't. It's one of them you don't really pick out the nose, but it's this kind of simmering, bubbling volcano, and it's hot. And obviously, the more years Hera spent with Zeus, or millennia she spent with Zeus, she got a little bit angry. She was rightly so, but she was quite a vengeful, vindictive kind of person. Strangely, it was rare she blamed Zeus. She blamed everybody else but Zeus. But anyway, that's for Hera and Zeus. So that's Goldman from Amouage and Terroni from Orto Parisi. Next is Hermes, or Hermes, it's Hermes, isn't it? And Penelopeia. Now, Hermes was the son of Zeus. His mum was actually only pregnant for a day, which is quite handy, isn't it? Obviously that wasn't Hera. So yeah, and obviously when Hermes came out, he was a very speedy kind of guy, could move very quickly. He stole some of Poseidon's cows or something or other. He was quite a mischievous little boy. Anyway, Penelopeia was an she was a nymph. And Hermes used to go kind of to this mountain. She was a mountain nymph, and in Arcadia to tend and look after curly-haired sheep, as you do. And he'd do this as a kind of mortal, you know. He'd just be some normal bloke, and he enjoyed doing it. Anyway, he fell madly in love with Penelopeia, and they got married, and they had a son. Now, we all know this son is quite famous. He was born with a full beard, some horns, and goat's feet. Yes, their son was Pan. So yeah, theirs is a fairly alright, nice, pleasant love story, isn't it? There's no awfulness involved in this. So what have I picked for them? So yeah, for Hermes I've picked Kilian Straight to Heaven. Now this is a kind of rummy, boozy one, and an awful lot of patchouli and an awful lot of cedar. It's kind of, it's very woody. The booziness adds the sweetness there, and it's got quite an edge, but it's quite earthy as well. And the reason I picked this for Hermes is that Hermes also had many jobs, one of which was to transport some of the souls to the underworld. So it was, yeah, it's quite, you know, poignant that he'd smell quite earthy, but also quite boozy and classy and elegant. He did get up to some absolute nonsense, but he wasn't particularly one of the worst gods out there. And what about for Penelopeia? Well, we've gone for Penhaligons Lunar. This is because she was a mountain nymph, and this makes me think of a mountain spring, if you like. It's very kind of fresh and watery from the juniper. But it's also got this kind of peachiness about it, which I get peachiness, other people get slightly a different fruity feel from it. And there's, I think it's jasmine, predominantly is the main floral. It's this kind of fresh, vibrant, watery, kind of beautiful one. Now obviously Penelopeia was supposed to be very beautiful. She was a nymph. She'd be splashing around in these mountain streams. It's got this kind of fresh depth and warmth. It would just, I think it would just suit her. So yeah, I'm not going to waffle on because some of these are going to get very long. For Penelopeia is Penhaligons Lunar, and for Hermes is what's it face, Kilian's Straight to Heaven. Next we're going to get to one of the most famous love stories from these myths. It's not Narcissus and Echo, it's actually Narcissus and Narcissus. So yeah, anyway, for poor Narcissus, it all kind of started when someone fell in love with him. Someone who'd never really spoke to him or didn't really know much about him, just because of his looks. He was an extremely attractive man. Yes, and she kind of was just obsessed, but he rejected her. Now Echo had been punished by Hera previously to only ever to be able to repeat the words back of what someone else says, because you guessed it, Zeus was up to no good and trying to get his end away. But yeah, so she stalks him, but she can't talk to him, and she like I say, she thinks she's in love with him, madly in love with him. And he's a bit of a loner, likes his own company, and he rejects her. And she kind of dies and fades away. Quite sad really, but yeah, the broken heart and all that. So the nymphs punish him, and what happens is he ends up seeing his reflection in a pond, and he sees in this reflection the most beautiful man he's ever seen, and he becomes transfixed by his reflection, as you'd expect. And he just falls madly in love, and he's just unable to leave. And whenever he tries to touch him or whatever, obviously the water moves it away, and he's there for a long time and starves to death, as you would do. And where he dies, a little Narcissus flower, daffodil, was left to kind of remember him by. And I mean, it was sad what happened to Echo, but it wasn't really Narcissus' fault. And yeah, I think he got quite a rough end of the stick there, didn't he? But it is what it is. And what I've picked for Narcissus is Fate. Fate is a Narcissus heavy fragrance. It's got Narcissus, it's got other florals in there. It's got a touch of spice, it's Amouage, it's kind of got this resinous warmth. But it is like a kind of classy, elegant 80s fragrance. You could kind of go down that path. It's not anywhere near the same as Coco, but it's got that kind of, you know, spicy floral vibe about it. And the Narcissus is the main floral that goes through it. And Narcissus is so beautiful. The kind of yellowy green, fresh feel, sometimes a little bit sharp, and it just smells like a real flower. Now daffodils do have a smell if you get very close to them, and it's like that. So obviously, as an ode to Narcissus, who was very badly wronged, is Fate from Amouage. So next is another singular person, and he was a mortal. And the reason I've picked him is because he ultimately is the love god. He's evolved with 4 gods. He's that handsome and that attractive and that irresistible that, yeah, he deserves a little section of his own. Now Adonis, he was the son of Mira, you could say, who had offended Aphrodite, obviously. And Aphrodite, you know, never took too kindly to this sort of things. I think she said her daughter was more beautiful, so she made her fall in love with and seduce her father. Indeed. And obviously this was by tricking him. You know, her father didn't willingly do this. So Pops, as you'd imagine, was a little disgusted and appalled by what had happened, and he kind of chases her away. She's sad, and she begs for mercy from the gods, and they then turn her into a myrrh tree. Now, born of this incest was the son Adonis. And now Aphrodite, I don't know what she was doing, she just happened to be passing by this tree, and she felt a little bad when she found the baby. She couldn't be bothered to raise him by herself, 'cause, you know. So she sent him to the underworld to be brought up by Persephone. And during this time, Persephone creepily fell in love with Aphrodite, a kind of adopted son. Elon Musk's father would know all about that sort of thing, I suppose. And they, yeah, apparently, you know, Persephone couldn't help it because he was so beautiful. Aphrodite went to visit and also decided he's the most beautiful mortal she'd ever seen, and she wanted a piece of him. So yeah, there was a bit of argy-bargy between Aphrodite and Persephone, and in the end Zeus had to intervene, as he always does, and he said, right, look, spend a third of his time with you, Aphrodite, a third of his time with you, Persephone, and then what he does with the other third of the year is completely up to him. Now, he chose to spend that extra bit of time with Aphrodite. Well, mysteriously then he was killed by a boar. Now, there are different stories about this. One is that Ares, through his jealous rage, you know, did it with a boar. The other is, of course, because of the mysterious timing, is that it was Persephone. And obviously what happens when he was killed by the boar, where would Adonis go? Yeah, exactly. And also during his time as a kind of stud muffin, he also had a relationship with Heracles, who was very, very fond of him. And that, you know, Heracles could have anyone, but he chose Adonis, and they had quite a brief little fling. And also Apollo was madly in love with him, and he had a relationship with Apollo, which was ended by Apollo's sister, who is the hunty god, Artemis. Yes, Artemis didn't think he was right for him, so yeah, I mean, again, who this boar was, or who this boar was kind of persuaded to do what he did, was it could be anyone. So what I've picked for him is Nectar of Love. This is because this guy is irresistible. I mean, completely irresistible, apparently. You know, this chiseled, muscled, hot piece of fluff there. And Nectar of Love is kind of all these flower petals with this kind of nectary, sometimes almost honey kind of feel. There's neroli, there's rose, there's all sorts of flowers. There might be honeysuckle, all these lovely, beautiful, sweet flower petals with that nectar running through it. It's completely irresistible. It's summery, it's beautiful, it's just magical. And this, I think, is what Adonis would smell of, all the most beautiful flowers in the world. This addictive sweet nectar that you want to lick off him, apparently. Yeah, I think it's this him. So for Adonis is Aromatics Nectar of Love. So next we're back to Mr. Infidelity himself, Zeus, and Io. Now this is actually where Zeus, for once, is fairly decent. There's no insisting on Io's love, let's put it like that. So Io was a priestess of Hera, and obviously served in one of her temples. As Zeus spotted her, and as he does, he really lusted after her. They got it on, but to keep her from the vengeance of Hera, who he knew she always finds out, he hid her and turned her into a cow. Now obviously Hera knew all this, and he knew she knew what he'd done, so she insisted that Zeus gifts her the cow. You know, why would he not? And to be fair, he had no reason to say no without giving it all away. So he gifts her the cow, and the cow is kind of left, you know, in a field all alone, which is quite sad, isn't it? But Gaia, the earth goddess, she felt a little kind of sorry for Io the cow, so she created violets for her. Ions, yeah, see? And she ate these beautiful sweet flowers and kept relatively comfortable. Now then, what then happened is Hera sent the 100-eyed giant to keep an eye on her, so that Zeus didn't sneak off and go see her. However, Zeus, you know, he's like, oh, I do really want to see her, you know, I've got these needs and these urges. So he sent Hermes to distract Argos, which was the 100-eyed giant, And Hermes didn't only kind of bore him to death and send him to sleep with loads of stories, he also chopped off his head. And in kind of a niceness and an honour to Argos, Hera made the peacock have all of his 100 eyes placed upon its feathers. So there you go, that's where the peacock comes from. Anyway, Zeus frees Io, and she kind of, you know, goes away. But again, Hera won't let it go, so she sends a little fly to keep stinging Io continuously, endlessly, chasing her away, so she can't get any rest, she can't relax, and she just wandered and wandered. Eventually, what happened in the end, she met what's his face, Prometheus at some point, blah blah blah, but Zeus turned her back into a mortal human, and she had some children, Epheus and Parisi. So it doesn't end particularly well, but at least in the end she gets peace and she escapes the games of the gods. Now, what fragrance have I picked for these two? For Zeus, because of his, you know, ultimately his love of a cow, and I suppose he's protecting her in a kind of nice way for once. I've gone for Ombre leather from Tom Ford, which is a beautiful leather. It's kind of this soft, plush, sometimes a little bit suede-y black leather, and it's what kind of really makes it stand out is the beautiful sweetness and softness of the jasmine going through it. Now, I know she ate violets, but the soft jasmine flowers and the leather is a nice ode, isn't it, really, to it all. And has been a god. He's going to wear a badass fragrance where he smells amazing, isn't he? So for Zeus is Tom Ford's Ombre leather. For Io, well, come on, there's a million different violet fragrances, but this time I've gone for Misia. Again, because Io was obviously very beautiful, very classy, and you know, she was a priestess. She's obviously, you know, quite irresistible if he's lusting after her. And Misia is kind of this classic powdered violet one that kind of takes you back to the days like the 1930s and 40s with this elegance and powder everywhere and the strong smell of violet from the makeup and that. And it's got iris and rose in it as well, so it's just a very elegant one. It's got a touch of leather in the base, which is why I particularly went for Misia, because of course she was turned into a cow. And it would suit somebody like Io, wouldn't it? After she definitely smell of violets. I mean, I'm lactose intolerant, but her milk when she was a cow was probably quite tasty, isn't it? Really. Anyway, so yeah, for Io I've gone for Chanel's Misia, and for Zeus was Ombre leather from Tom Ford. So next is one of the more famous love stories that we all kind of know about, and that's Orpheus and Eurydice, whatever. So yeah, Orpheus is given a lyre, which is a kind of harpy thing, by Apollo, and he teaches him how to play it. Nobody could resist this enchanting music of his beautiful playing and that. Anyway, he falls in love with Eurydice, who he married, and weirdly he got Hymen, Apollo's son, to bless the wedding. There's probably some connection there that I don't want to look into. However, someone predicted that it just wouldn't last, this marriage, that it was doomed. Eurydice goes for a dance with some nymphs one day and gets bitten by a snake and dies instantly. So yeah, Orpheus, you know, being quite emo, he's quite sad, as you would be, and he plays lots of sad music, which both moves the gods and humans alike. One day, however, he decides to go to the underworld and beg Hades, and during his journey he's protected by the gods, because anybody else would obviously not make it and die. Hades, he plays Hades and Persephone a little song, Do you know what? Hades goes, alright, I'll do it, but there's a condition behind it. You're not allowed to look back. You know, you've got to keep always looking forward and just trust she's there behind you till you get out. So long story short, Orpheus is a bit of a dick, a bit of an idiot. And just as they get to the top, he looks back. Well, he was warned, and obviously he's quite devastated by this, because obviously she's stuck there forever, and no mortal can enter the underworld more than once. Well, unless they're dead, obviously. So he's quite sad, and he wants to die. He wants to end it all. He's had enough. So he plays very sad songs and stuff. And in the end, some nymphs tear him to pieces. Although his head stayed intact and floated down the river to Lesbos for whatever reason. Yeah, and that's kind of the end of the story, really. It's a bit of an idiot, wasn't he? It's his own stupid fault. So for Orpheus, what have I picked? Well, I could stay at that dog. I've picked Sirens and Sailors from Jusbox. Now, the kind of premise behind this is it's kind of based around Amy Winehouse, great artist, got a lot of feeling and love in her songs. And he wasn't always just miserable, was he? Obviously he'd play some jaunty tunes, otherwise people wouldn't have loved him. And he'd kind of be a bit of a party god in a way, I suppose, wouldn't he? With his fine music. And Sirens and Sailors is kind of boozy, as Claire Smith puts it, naughty party, where there's lots of debauchery and lots of alcohol, lots of fornication and fun, which I presume his music would have done. I just think it kind of suits him. Well, the happy Orpheus, that is. So yeah, and then next is the Eurydice. Eurydice. I got it right for once. Eurydice. She would wear just a kind of... I don't think she's all that interesting a person, is she? So I'm going to go for Coco Mademoiselle from Chanel, another Chanel, because she would have just worn what's popular. It's a very kind of loud fragrance that all the popular people wore. You know, it's a fruituli. It's kind of got these big brash citruses and dried fruits, and this grainy kind of patchouli there, and musks. It's very bright. It's very kind of, you can't help but like it. It can be a struggle to wear, like I say, because of its bigness. But yeah, it would suit somebody like her, and obviously he'd be made very happy by this perfume. So for Eurydice is Coco Mademoiselle from Chanel, and for Orpheus, Sirens and Sailors from Jusbox. Next we will move on to another tragic love story featuring Apollo's second appearance in this. Now, this is Apollo and Hyacinthus. Now, this is a very tragic love story, which I'm sure we all know. So Hyacinthus was a studly athletic Spartan, you know, perfectly formed. He would have had very cute, tight, peachy buns, I imagine. And Apollo fell deeply in love with him. Love, really. Lust, maybe. But anyway, he wasn't the only one. Wink. So one day they decided to throw some discuses, have a bit of fun, you know. Obviously Apollo goes first, he's quite the show off, isn't he? And throws the discus high. Hyacinthus, well, this chap is all brawn and athleticism, so he's not really, you know, these sorts of people are not known for their intellect or capacity to really think about things, so he's kind of running and skipping about, all jolly, looking up at it. You know, not the sharpest tool in the box. So he's playing about. Now Zephyrus, who is the west wind god, was very jealous of their relationship, as he was also crazy in love with Hyacinthus. So what he did is he used his powers to blow the discus at Hyacinthus. You know, if I can't have you, nobody can. And it hit him in the head and killed him stone dead. Now Apollo did everything he possibly could to try and save him, but he couldn't, and Apollo was you know, obviously quite upset, quite sad, and he died in his arms, didn't he? And Apollo made a flower grow from his blood. Now then, we would all assume, rightly so, that it was a hyacinth flower. Apparently not. Apparently it was actually supposed to have been an iris flower, a yellow iris at that as well. But for the purpose of this story, was sticking with a hyacinth because that makes actual sense, doesn't it? And yeah, Apollo was heartbroken, and as a lot of these gods do in honour, there's a lovely beautiful flower, a lovely blue gorgeous flower that smells wonderful in his honour. So for Apollo, I've decided to send him with lunar dust from Mabelle. Really, it's that obvious, isn't it? Yeah, it's like moon dust. Apollo, the moon god. Well, he's not the moon god, but the moon, you know? So yeah, we've gone for that. Lunar dust is kind of this beautifully dusty, silvery, kind of irisy one with the dusty woods and I think it's cedar and the molecular iris, and it just gives this kind of beautiful calm impression of the surface of the moon. Now Apollo was no angel. Him and Artemis had many bitter arguments, shall we say, and yeah, none of the gods were good, but you know, you can imagine this calm side of him, this love he had for Hyacinthus, this beautiful kind of musky dustiness, and him being enthralled and seduced by the beauty of Hyacinthus. And yeah, I think lunar dust works nicely for him. And for Hyacinthus, I've gone for Chloe's love, sadly discontinued. Now this one is your violet kind of powdery iris one. Now I'm not entirely sure violet is a listed note in this, but it smells very purple. It's got lots of purple flowers in it. Wisteria, hyacinth obviously. There's more. There might be violet in it, I can't remember, but it smells very violetty. And it's very powdery, and it's got a beautiful fresh greenness through it. So it would be like a fresh, lovely spring hyacinth. It's absolutely gorgeous. Sad it went, really. But yeah, of course, that's perfect for Hyacinthus because it's got a hyacinth in it, and it's very purple. It's very lovely, and this is a proper love story. Apollo did love him, and was deeply upset by his death. But yeah, it's what happens with these love triangles amongst the gods, isn't it? So for Apollo is lunar dust from Mabelle, and for Hyacinthus is Chloe's love. So finally is another kind of sort of lovely story, and a famous one. It's Eros and Psyche, or Psyche. I think it's Psyche, isn't it? So we know who Eros was. He was the son of Aphrodite. He had a magic bow and arrow that made people fall instantly in love in an unbreakable way. And Psyche was the daughter of a king. Everyone thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world, even more beautiful than Aphrodite. Spoilers here, Aphrodite was a little miffed with this, shock horror. So she wanted her revenge. Obviously on Psyche, because why not? It's clearly her fault. And this, you know, goddess of protected women, well, whatever, anyway. She told her Eros to make her fall in love with a vile, awful, disgusting creature. Anywho, Eros saw her and accidentally pierced his heart with one of his arrows and fell madly in love with her, as you do. There was a prophecy also kind of going round that she was going to die alone, and although incredibly beautiful, nobody ever seemed to want her. they'd always go for somebody else. Maybe she was just too beautiful for anyone to ever truly want her. What a curse, eh? So she went to this hill to die alone. However, as she kind of sat there, a soft gentle wind carried her to a beautiful palace. Now, in this palace she was cared for and looked after. Eros never revealed himself, but he takes care of her. Like I say, they fall in love, and she gets up the duff, although that's never mentioned again. Anyway, she feels lonely and wants to see whoever this wonderful person is, but instead she decides she's missing home a bit and missing her sisters. So he begrudgingly agrees, as long as she doesn't answer too many questions or get tricked by them or whatever, and reveal really anything about her husband, as the prophecy will come true. Anyway, she sort of breaks her promise. They kind of trick her into saying, well, persuade her into saying he's some evil, disgusting snake. And so she gets this in her mind, and one night she waits till Eros has gone to sleep and she goes to look at him, and instead of a snake monster, obviously she finds a very beautiful man. Now, Eros is not too pleased about this. He says something about trust and all of that, which is fair enough. You know, there's no foundations to a relationship without trust. So he flies off. Yeah. And in the end, because she's so beside herself and so upset, she has to ask Aphrodite for help, because the other goddesses didn't want to get involved. Well, she does decide to, in her own way, give some very useless, awful help, and she sends her two of her attendants, who are called Sorrow and Worry. So yeah, we can see how this is going. And then she gives her some impossible tasks to do, and in the end she does them all. But the final one is to bring a piece of Persephone's beauty in a box from the underworld, which she does. But you know, these people are idiots. Psyche decides to open the box and nothing happens, because she wants to get more beautiful or something, and nothing happens. But she falls off into a sleep that she can't wake from. Anyway, Eros finds her and asks Zeus for help, and he demands Aphrodite stops her vendetta and helps her wake up. So she drinks some ambrosia so they can be together forever. So I suppose she'll be like a god. And they live happily ever after in a palace filled with flowers and roses, etc. So yeah, that's the end of that one. So what I picked for Eros is Frederic Malle's Lipstick Rose. For many reasons. Lipstick Rose is obviously, it's a very romantic, lovely fragrance. Again, it's that kind of makeup-y one, isn't it? There's violet, there's rose, iris in it. It's very, but it's more like a lipstick than the kind of makeup-y, powdery feel. There is a powderiness and what have you about it, but it's very much like that. And the powdery soft tenderness comes from like rose petals. And obviously he always had this palace full of flowers for her, etc. So that goes with it. There's also this kind of sharp touch from the grapefruit in there. And again, Eros shoots arrows, sharpness. See what I did there? Yeah, I know it's very tenuous, but it is what it is. I just think it would be a great fragrance for Eros in this situation. I mean, he is ultimately the guy who makes people fall in love and all of that jazz. Now, for Psyche, I picked Mugler's Alien. Yeah, it's got to be in here somewhere, innit? First of all the flowers, but also that kind of irresistible dark beauty. And obviously, really, she does have a dark, sad story, doesn't she? Till she meets Eros, and Aphrodite's kind of bitter jealousy, that's always kicking about. plays a big role in it. So yeah, obviously Psyche being incredibly beautiful and irresistible, which Alien is. It's just the most magical, enchanting, wonderful fragrance ever. It would definitely be the fragrance of a god, wouldn't it? Them mega musks, and yeah. But I don't need to waffle on, we all know what Alien is. So for Psyche is Mugler's Alien, the original of course. And for what's his face, Eros, is Frederic Malle's Lipstick Rose. The end. So yeah, I'm hoping this didn't go on too long, some long ones, some short ones. Greek mythology lends itself to everything, doesn't it? Every moment, every interesting thing. It's just so rich with these ridiculous stories and daft myths and daft situations. I think most of these stories were fairly romantic. Even some of the Zeus ones were not so bad. There were a lot more horrific stories in there that I could have picked, but I didn't. I've tried to keep it nice for Valentine's. And that's basically it. I don't need to waffle on. What was your favourite kind of Greek myth love story? How would you have centred these mortals and gods? What are you going to wear for Valentine's? I hope you have a good one. I will not be partaking. You know, maybe I just have a cat. I might buy her something a little nice, but if I was involved with someone, I wouldn't need one day to give loads of money to rich people. So yeah, happy Valentine's all. Goodbye.